Welcome to Canyon Lake Unfiltered, where we talk about what's really going on around the lake. No fluff, no filters. From local stories and community issues to the people that make Canyon Lake what it is. This is real talk from right here at home.
Welcome back to Canyon Lake Unfiltered, where we talk about what's really going on in our communities, the technology shaping our future, and the conversations a lot of people are afraid to openly have. Today's guest is Phillip, a tech marketer with an international background whose career has moved through venture capital, crypto, and emerging technology. He's been deeply involved in AI, civic transparency projects here in Comal County, and conversations around surveillance, government accountability, and what artificial intelligence may mean for everyday people in small town America. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. So, Phillip, welcome to Canyon Lake Unfiltered.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to my fellow Comal County residents. So, definitely excited.
Great. Now, before we get started, let's go ahead and just talk about the elephant in the room. And you are wearing a mask, as everybody can see. So do you want to dig into that a little bit and just talk about why you choose to wear a mask?
Yeah, so it's multifaceted. The reason why I want to wear the mask is to essentially hide the digital footprint of my existence, make it essentially just a little bit harder for what's coming in the future for people to be able to identify me and pinpoint me and figure out my whereabouts, locations. You probably also see my rooms completely blurred. But there's also some security issues and concerns that I have with where the future's heading in these regards. Probably a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about is exactly this. And I really just want to hide my identity partially. I'm not scared of the local community seeing this. My big concern is we're connected to the internet. And the big real threat is what's going on outside of our bubble. We're definitely going to be covering some of these topics and where the second and third order effects are going to be a risk.
Understand. Okay. So for people hearing your name for the first time, who is Phillip? Tell us about you.
Well, Phillip is, I guess, a quasi name that was given to me. That's that. But speaking from me, I'm sort of what some people would call a degenerate. It depends sort of what perspective you're taking a look at me from. So I'm trying to figure out a decent description. I sort of do and chase the dopamine of interests and topics of what concern me. I have a sort of very traditional academic background, which is went through a business school. I lived abroad. I went to school in foreign countries and got multiple degrees in business and worked also professionally in various industries. Mostly interested in marketing. Actually, interest is a very loose term. That's sort of my expertise, where I've gained skills. That was probably one of my first interests in sort of my life journey. I believe there's this new era of new form Renaissance man, which is about being self-sufficient through the whole entire stack of life. So fix my own cars, work on my own computers, code my own software, essentially build and do everything myself, as well as taking a deep interest in various topics that I like to read in.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you mentioned you've lived abroad. I have too. As a matter of fact, I lived for nearly 20 years overseas, in the Middle East, actually. How does that change the way you see America?
It was a process. Actually, initially when I first went abroad, it sort of shook the world frame, the frame of like, hey, things. America isn't the center of the world. It isn't as great as we were told or convinced in school, and that sort of was the adopted view that I had for probably the first couple of years. Actually, it was probably so I spent in total 10 years abroad, and Yeah, so probably the first 7 years was really this mindset and being very hypercritical of the United States and what's going on. Politics got definitely interesting. I moved abroad in 2013, so from Obama, then over to Trump, then Biden, and actually returned here under Biden. Yeah, so seeing sort of the politics from abroad was interesting. You definitely leave like the dichotomy. The U.S. is very like we're only going to split you up into two parties, and you're either left or right. And there's not going to be, if you don't identify with one of those groups, you're sort of out of luck. And then, of course, there's like coalitions within ones, but you generally have to like vote within or be in that same shared block. So that worldview definitely got destructed of like separate lines. But I think I realized later on in my time abroad was a lot of places have their issues too. And that was sort of the eye-opening realization. And it really came during the pandemic in 2020, where I started seeing a lot of issues with other countries and seeing no place had, I felt there was a lot of infringement on personal freedoms and individual freedoms to sort of this like ludicrous level of you cannot go outside past 10 p.m. And when I started seeing all this, I'm like, and then seeing this happening in the U.S. and depending in what different state, this is also probably why I chose to move to Texas. I have no roots to Texas, but I chose Texas because of how they went around. They essentially tried locking down, and nobody listened to the rules.
Yeah.
That's essentially it. Like if there's a power above that says, hey, you have to follow these rules, and there is like some absurdity, I want to be around the place where people recognize the absurdity instead of like falling in line. So I came to the realization, culturally, the U.S. has a lot of self-sovereign people and mentality for individual freedoms. And yeah, that's essentially, it's a very long way around to answering your question.
That's okay. So you said you had roots in Texas?
No, I have no roots in Texas.
Well, what brought you here then?
Um, the essentially seeing. So I'm under the premise. It was multifaceted. So I do see the world going into this form of balkanization. Balkanization comes from the Balkans, where essentially you had one last landmass, Yugoslavia, that was then cut up into 13, 14 different, I think it's actually 11 different countries. And everybody sort of like went on their own ways in a decentralized way. And I think what has happened is we had peak centralization in the world probably in the 60s, 70s. And we're actually, if you look at the trend line, we're actually going backwards now. You're seeing countries splitting. You're seeing political lines being split. So I do believe there is going to be this like great balkanization of the world over the next 100 years. This is going to occur, and then of course after completely everything's been decentralized, it's going to be centralized again. So that's an important context of why I chose Texas, because I felt if we do have an extreme balkanization, what area, what country could do well? I do think the U.S. can survive such a balkanization. Second off, which state can do that? And thirdly, I do want to be around around a culture that I'm more familiar with, because as this balkanization occurs, you do want to be around very familiar culture. And me having grown up in the States, I was relatively familiar with the American values and specifically Texas values, which sort of leans more in a constitutional direction. Yeah.
Okay. So what has surprised you most about Texas culture?
The willingness for authority, actually, that has shocked me. Even though there's this weird dynamic going on that I've like recently discovered of the willingness of like, hey, if you got nothing to hide, no worries. Like you can share, you can reveal your information. I'm like, whoa. So we want to be individuals, but you're now saying if you got nothing to hide, show me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've described yourself as intellectually restless. What does that mean exactly?
It's this deep desire of like knowing, almost like truth seeking, and I will go down a rabbit hole and I will spend 2 days of almost no sleep, like maybe 4 hours, 5 hours no sleep on a weekend, or like it may overlap with a work week, and like I'll do my work, but then whenever I get a free chance, I'm like researching and trying to figure out. I'm reading research papers, reading opinions on X, reading different news, going through the media archives of like historical records of whatever I'm researching. Like right now, maybe about 2 weeks ago, I went down this deep rabbit hole of lynchings in the United States. I want to know every single lynching that happened in the United States during the Reconstruction era and know how did each lynching come into existence. I'm actually even like building a database and tagging different identifying markers of these lynchings to be able to see which ones were unjust, which ones were just lawlessness, which ones were accidents, which ones were false accusations, because nobody's actually ever been able to put this together. The closest is actually the book that's right here. The Red Record, which is known within sort of like the pro-black movement as sort of one of the best record keepings of lynchings. But even in that book, there's only about 400, and there's in total about 4,300.
Correct.
And it's just this restlessness of like, I need to figure out what is this missing pieces and trying to put them together.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You also mentioned that you've worked around venture capital, crypto, and AI. What's something regular people completely misunderstand about the world of technology?
A couple of things. I guess like the first would be the laws of exponential, which a lot of people in the world think very linearly. They think your wealth grows linearly. They think innovation, life gets better at a linear level. But in reality, things are exponentially growing. It's compounding every year over year. So like AI development, like we've been developing AI for probably this form of LLMs. I think it's like 8 years, 10 years, like really deep into it. But we're now just hitting the curve where it's bending and sloping upwards. And I think people struggle to sort of see like where is the next point in this line. They're still thinking linearly, but really it's going to be 10x what you just experienced this year in the next year. So yeah, I would say that. Another thing is it's right now turned very, I don't want to say scammy, but it's turned very Ponzi-like. Mm-hmm. Everybody's sort of chasing a status, the next raise. Like I think SpaceX is now doing their IPO at a $2 trillion valuation, but they're only generating, I think, like $15-20 billion in revenue. And that just is screaming, hey, this is a bit of a Ponzi here, and who's really the exit liquidity is going to become the stock market, the people on the stock market.
Right.
Yeah, I guess those are like the two things I think people should sort of know. A third, I should give something a little bit more positive. That a lot of the people are really smart, very interesting, unique individuals with unique worldviews, and when you talk with a lot of these people, they actually mean well. So there are a lot of good people in the industry, and they do want to improve the world, and they do have great ideas that they're trying to achieve. But at the same time, there's a lot of other Ponzi's going on. It's just sort of generally life.
Okay. All right, let's talk about AI. Let's talk about AI for a minute. Everybody talks about AI right now. It's the hot thing. But how much of it is real versus how much of it is marketing hype?
That is a good question. And this is like a great debate that like a lot of people have, even within these circles. A lot of people say, hey, this is overhyped, while other people are saying, no, this is totally undervalued, like the disruption. And it's mostly people struggling to see this is my take of like people struggling to see the time horizon. And it's like, is innovation coming? Is innovation coming within the next year, or is it going to be in 10 years? And what is it going to look like? And some people are mapping out what's going to actually happen in 10 years to what's going to happen next year. So there is a lot of hype around it. And I will say the hype is a marketing gimmick. So often somebody will release a new tool. I try to touch as many AI tools as possible. They will release a new tool. I'll go download the package, sign up, and essentially do the whole process. And then I see what it can do versus what's like advertised in their videos, and I'm like, hey, this is a dud. But again, this then I can quickly discover, I'm like, oh, okay, this person's falling into the Ponzi category. But on the other side, it's like right now, actually, as we're speaking, I have AI building a couple of websites for me, and they're talking with each other, and they're reiterating, and they're running tests on it. I haven't checked the status in the last hour, but I know right now agents are working. I also have personal agents on another computer right now running that just has a view over parts of my life. I have other agents that are making sure that my work and my professional career is running and doing its job. So I'm essentially having multiple things working right now for me, and I think that's there's a lot of value within that. So there is innovation, there are things going on, and people can actually use it way more than they actually think. So to your question, it's 50-50. It depends where you sit and what you're doing with it.
Okay. So if you can, I mean, you pretty much either had a front row seat or you've actually been involved in AI. So what's happening behind the scenes that maybe regular people don't see or don't realize?
There's again there's a lot. It depends like what perspective that you want to look at it from. But from like the general mass consumer side of things, I think people do not know the magnitude of agentic AI. These are autonomous AIs that are able to essentially do things and execute on your behalf. Essentially, the harnesses and infrastructure that's being built specifically for these agents and the capabilities and magnitude that they can operate at. Nowadays you can have if you're a really good software engineer, you can operate hundreds, if not thousands, of these agents to go do things for you and execute. For example, there was just yesterday a raise announcement from this company. I'm blanking on the company's name, but they just raised money, and it's a one-man startup, and they're generating already 10 million annual revenue, reoccurring revenue. And it's essentially one guy operating hundreds of different agents, and they've built supposedly 6,000 different small businesses that are generating money. He essentially just tells his agents, go make money. So it's like, these are things that are like happening behind the scenes, and we're seeing small teams being able to execute at the scale of a team. Like you have a team of 8 people, they're able to execute as if they were 500 people.
Right. I've delved into a little bit of agentic AI, but not quite. I think that's the next step for me is to start getting more involved with agentic AI. What's the most impressive AI tool that you've personally used?
It changes. It literally changes every 2-3 weeks, where I'm newly impressed. Sometimes I'm disappointed. But I guess 2 years ago, every time a new tool came out, it was more likely I was going to be disappointed. Nowadays, it's like I'm more likely to be impressed.
Mm-hmm.
So like the quality of these things are getting significantly better. I guess the most impressive tool would be Claude Code. So this is Anthropic's tool. They essentially built this internally, and everybody was actually just internally at their company was coding with AI. And they're like, hey, this is a good product for our software developers. Why don't we just release it to the public? Once they released it to the public, it just took off like wildfire within sort of like the tech world, where it's now like somebody like me who has very basic understanding of software development is now able to build complicated systems and implement them into his own workplace. So I would say Claude Code is the big innovation. But then like in January, you had OpenClaw that came out, which was which like took it to a whole nother level of like, now you have this entire harness ecosystem where you can have multiple agents all working on like specific objectives, and you can then give them individual skills or direction, and they all are working with each other and communicating with them. And I can go walk off and take a walk in the woods and essentially text my bot to be able to continue building. But I guess like that step wasn't possible until like Claude Code became like sort of mainstream.
Right. Yeah.
So
my last few years in my career, I spent as a data analyst, and I used AI to help me write code, like Python code
Oh yeah.
for data analysis. So yeah, I mean, it was just an amazing tool. I would give it its, I would, give AI the task that I needed done. They would write the code for me, and I could concentrate on something else while it was being done. And that was amazing for me. And it was, made my job so much more easier.
What was like the error rate? Because behind the scenes, before the call, you said you retired like a year ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what model were you using, and like how were you communicating with the AI?
I was using just Chat GPT, the coding that they had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's sort of like how I started. Was very similar. It was just writing JavaScript, basic HTML, and also Python scripts, and I was able to do things. But if you haven't done it yet, try out Claude Code. Like it will blow your mind. It's like
Yeah.
that Chat GPT, but on a 100x scale. Yeah.
And I have to admit, the error code was pretty low. I mean, of course, I always made sure I double checked, but it was pretty low. It was very impressive. I always considered Chat GPT like my administrative assistants. You always have to recheck their work before you present it. That's the way I always looked at it, and it was pretty good. It saved me a lot of time. It really did.
Yeah. I would like to like caveat and like really want to push you to like, even though you're now not working in that field, but like trying it out again, or even like if you want to just analyze specific data within the data set that's just for your
Yeah.
own interest, just plug it into Claude Code. You run it in your terminal, and you just like create a folder, and you just let it run in your terminal, and it will go do the research for you. It'll bring back better data. It'll write better analysis than like even like I'm not too great at analysis. I've gotten significantly better since AI, but it can actually even think and help you advance further. And you probably noticed like the big key for you was like how you prompted it, right? To be able to get those end results. And at that time period, it was like you still needed that expertise knowledge to be able to steer it in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about input. It's only going to be as good as what you input, and not just the data, but the instructions that you provide, the prompts that you give it. If you give it bullshit prompts, you're going to get bullshit output, to be honest with you.
It's garbage
So,
in, garbage out.
yeah,
What we say.
that's what I learned. I learned a lot about that is prompt engineering, asking the right questions, giving the right commands is very important when you're using, an LLM like ChatGPT. What scares you about AI?
Actually, not too much scares me. I'm actually pretty comfortable with it. What I guess like scares me more is people's perspective, the way that they go. It's probably the people, the human factor that scares me the most.
Right.
With how they go about with AI. So you have like this like doomerism of like we're really scared of AI replacing us, so they want to restrain AI. But I think that's a totally wrong perspective on it. And they're going to have this like distance and push themselves away from AI, which then is going to actually hurt them in the long run. It's here to stay. It's here to grow. It's going to become super intelligence. It's a matter of when is it going to happen, where it supersedes human perception. Is it going to be in 100 years? Is it 50 years? Or is it 10 years? Those we aren't sure of, but it's going to happen. And I think the dissatisfaction and like trying to protect us from AI is not possible. So it's like accept that and figure out how you can integrate it. How should you perceive it? Because on the other end, you have people who are completely losing themselves in this concept called AI psychosis, where they are now believing the AI is completely telling them the truth. And in reality, what the AI is doing is this is like a fallacy, and of it is like people are treating AI as if it's like deterministic. Deterministic is simply like if you have this one input and you always put that one input, it's always going to equal this one output.
Yes.
A lot of people think that's how AI works. No, it's probabilistic. So it is going to have errors, and this is where this garbage in, garbage out concept comes.
Right.
So if people are treating a probabilistic output as being deterministic, they are going to start going, I guess, a little bit crazy into this AI psychosis.
I do have a little bit of fear, and I just hope we do it in the most intelligent way possible. And we don't allow the people who have AI psychosis to take over, because I think that would be very dangerous.
I agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, but there's also like the um, if this is going to inevitably happen. When like I guess like a darker but realistic perspective on this is like if this is going to happen, what side do you want to be on? Because it's like we already see it with like Ukraine that they're just using these like small little nano drones to essentially hit their targets and like fly right next to the head and blow up. Um,
Yeah,
and it's like being I guess like a realist on this. It's like we're at least as being Americans, being in the United States, we are in a better position at least. Now the question is like, will these weapons then be turned on their own citizens? That's then a whole another discussion. But I'm very like optimistic that if that ever were to happen, it wouldn't make it far because there's this like weird collective sense of belonging within the American people where it's like once it goes unjust, it's like we actually do fight back.
right. I agree. So, what excites you about AI?
The possibility that people can essentially break out of their own normal world understanding, or rather, their own skill sets, things are becoming much more accessible,
Right.
and anybody can access it. So, for example, I have no neuroscience background, but I built a tool using the Meta released Tribe V2 about a couple of weeks ago, which is they essentially did MRI scans as people were receiving stimuli on thousands of different people. And they then trained an AI model to essentially predict how people receive information. And I was able to take that tool and build for my work because I do a lot of tech marketing. Now, whenever I want to publish anything, marketing material in tech, I could run it through this model and see if this is actually going to be received the way I want it to be received using neuroscans. And it's like, I have no clue anything about neuroscience. I could be completely wrong, but according to the research that Meta did with this model, it is a very accurate model. It's actually, they even say in some instances it's even better than an MRI scan, because if you're scanning somebody in an MRI, they also have things such as they're scared of the machine, there's rooms, there's lights, all these different stimuli going on.
Right.
So they're able to actually even more accurately predict the pure stimuli response in the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I doubt that somebody like Meta would actually try to like ruin their reputation by posting false science.
Right. It's so amazing. The possibilities are just amazing and endless. You hear a lot of talk about jobs, losing jobs to AI. So what is your thoughts about what jobs that may actually be in danger, or is that over exaggerated?
I think it is partially, in the short term, it's over exaggerated. In the long term, I think we're underestimating the job replacements. It's not going to be anything that's going to happen within 1 or 2, 3 or 4 years, but I think over the next 30 years, you're going to see completely different job in this landscape, occupation landscape. And there's one also other thing, and probably everybody's familiar with it. Everything feels so bloated. Workplaces, there's just so many middlemen involved in all these different things, and all they're doing is essentially like being paper pushers was like the old term. Now it's just like email pushers.
Right.
And then they like take their little whatever fee for that, for just connecting two nodes. And I think a lot of jobs, there was a form of intelligence that was needed within a lot of these jobs that were relatively basic, but they're complicated. But now with the direction where LLMs are going, you can actually replace a lot of these positions. And I do walk around in the world the last 6 months of like, ooh, I could build something that replaces you. Ooh, I could build something that replaces this person. So I think it's on our doorstep. And really, I guess the last process, we're right now in this phase. Recently speaking with somebody in Comal County, and they're saying, oh, we're digitizing all our court records.
Yeah.
And the way I saw that was like, This is like the last offer towards like the AI god, so to say. Their last job is to digitalize everything, because then after that, it's like you're going to have a clerk who's just going to essentially search using just normal word language and find exactly the court documents that all are being requested. So now all of a sudden you go from like 10 clerks to only one clerk who's like just can operate 10 times faster.
Right. Yeah, and I've always thought, I've been dabbling in AI for a couple of years now, mostly Chat GPT, but I've always thought that the jobs, and I'm talking about near term, the jobs that the people that are going to survive this AI revolution are the people that know how to use AI sensibly.
Yeah.
People that will resist AI or misuse AI. Those are the people that are probably going to be looking for a new line of work. So if people aren't learning about AI and how to use it, I think they're falling behind. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I underwrite 80% of that. I do want to. One thing that I go around telling people is you either make the AI work for you, or you're going to work for the AI.
Yeah.
And there's going to be things where it's like robotics hasn't even caught up, but they're going to need somebody to execute things in the physical world. Now you're going to be essentially hired by an AI agent to go execute in the world.
Yeah, to go do something physical.
Yeah, there's concern, but if you're willing to learn about it and get yourself the experience, I think it can actually do well, especially right now. The opportunity as somebody who's like AI native to come into a workplace and disrupt is high.
Oh, yeah. So, do you think that AI is making humans smarter or mentally lazier?
Um, Both, it's if possible. So it's like, and this like I guess leans more into just what we were talking about before of like if you're not learning it, you're going to end up being replaced by it or pushed out, or you got to find a new job. So it's like I don't think it's making anybody lazier. To If it's making you lazier, you're already cooked. But every single technology that came in just like compounded, and AI is just going to be another compounder on your initial lazier. So I don't think it's making anybody lazier or dumber. Rather, it's amplifying it. It's like adding an exponential onto what you already are as a person. So if you're becoming lazy because of AI, guess what? You were always lazy. It's just now become easier. And no diss at lazy people. I actually genuinely like certain aspects about being lazy, because it can also be a fuel for innovation. By being lazy, you're like, I don't want to do this. Can I figure out a way to automate this? And then you build a tool that automates essentially your work, or you find a smarter way around it. And those people are going to thrive, actually, in AI. Mm-hmm. But then you have the lazy person who just really likes delegating things. If they're just a delegator, like, you can just put an agent, and the agent will delegate it for you.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit. Now, we've talked a lot about AI, but let's talk about flock cameras and surveillance technology, especially in Comal County. What exactly are these systems?
Yeah, so automatic license plate detection readers, ALDRs is an acronym for them. Flock is a company that is essentially just hitting the ground running and connecting with different cities and counties across the United States and installing cameras. With these ALDRs, it's in the acronym Automatic License Plate Detection Readers. They essentially take a picture, they take multiple pictures of your car as it's driving past. It's looking at your license plates and saving it in a database. They're also saving certain aspects of your image. They don't save the images for eternity because it just takes up way too much server space. But what they're doing is they're taking pictures over a certain period of time. They're documenting your GPS location. They're documenting the color of your car. They're taking note of your bumper stickers. So they also can see what like political alignment you are, where your kids go to school. They're also taking pictures of you sitting in the car, even though they say they don't do anything. They also have a patent, Flock specifically, has a patent for facial recognition and also movement patterns. So they can observe your shadow essentially moving and able to map that out to another shadow that was moving. So there's a lot of things that can be unlocked with this technology that isn't made yet, hasn't been implemented, but it's already there. But these license plates are essentially tracking your whereabouts throughout your neighborhood or wherever you drive past one of them, and these cameras are then being controlled by either city police or the county police or the state police, depending anybody. HOAs also have this. Home Depot already has contracts with it. If you go to any Home Depot in the county, you're going to see these black cameras with a what is it? Captures the sun and gets the power.
So, okay.
Yeah, so they're a small little black box with solar panels, and they're posted up all across Home Depots. And what they're doing is they're essentially saving your information from the images, but then they're also turning this into like metadata, which are creating like a matrix that's unique to your identifier. And if that matrix appears somewhere else on another camera, they know, okay, this person went to this place, and they can keep track of this over years. Just off of, without actually knowing your pictures, they save these matrices that were attached to your image. And I guess like most people will say, oh yeah, I don't mind that the county police can see us, but it gets even darker, because now it's like the county police is now sharing with all the other counties in a region. They sometimes share with the state, they share with the federal government, they share with other private entities. Then it's like, who has access to these cameras? It can essentially be anybody in the world. They also have a lot of security issues. But yeah, I guess I gave sort of like the basic run through of how this technology works.
Right. Okay. So why should regular people care about these technologies and the use of them?
So I will agree with sort of a little bit like people's willingness to use them, because it's like, hey, we're going to stop the bad guys. We're going to keep track of them. I have nothing to hide. Sure, go ahead. But I think the big concern is what you're doing is you're making a gateway. You're giving eyes to where you live, your movements, your family's movements, a large part of your identity. You're essentially giving eyes to a third-party entity that also isn't that greatly secure, that can essentially be exploited and then observed by other people. So I think the big concern from my end, I can also argue that like constitutionally this is illegal. According to U.S. versus Carpenter, this goes against a Supreme Court ruling of tracking the whereabouts of individual citizens without a warrant. That is actually illegal. They would argue, well, we're not tracking your whereabouts by GPS location, but at the same time, they're saving your history of every time you cross one. So this still needs to go to the Supreme Court to be decided upon. Yeah, and yeah, I guess the big concern, though, is these are eyeballs that are in your neighborhoods, and this can be used against you, more likely used against you than actually for protecting you, because what you're doing is essentially putting a camera that could be theoretically accessible by the entire world.
Understand. Okay. You have some people, and you mentioned it before, they hear, oh, I'm not doing anything wrong, or crime prevention, and think, what's the problem then?
It goes along again with like if you want to reduce crime, I actually sympathize with that. It's like, okay, You want to reduce it. However, you also need to look at where it's being implemented. Where the crime reduction has occurs in high crime areas. So you need to ask yourself, are we a high crime area? And what we see in the data of these flock cameras being implemented is when they're implemented in relatively safer areas, they have no impact on actual crime reduction. But they advertise, well, when we put it in Memphis, we saw shootings reduced by 60%. So it's like we're in places like Comal County. We are actually a relatively safe county. Crime is relatively low. We also were looking at. I was looking at the data of auto thefts, and I was trying to see if like the implementation of flocks changed anything. It's been actually in decline since 2021. Auto thefts per capita, and it's been reducing. And this was before flocks were implemented. And realistically, I don't think flocks have produced any I haven't made the FOIA request with all the different city agencies, but I don't think it has reduced any crime in our neighborhood. So ask yourself: are we in an unsafe area that actually needs these like totalitarian measures to protect us? And then second off is like, do you want eyeballs in your neighborhoods and your data being saved of what you do in your everyday life being saved in a database for anybody to access? And like people say, well, it's a secure database. It's any system is exploitable. And if you put this system into the global internet, anybody can access this. So that's really my big concern is there are entities out there that have an interest in knowing our whereabouts to be able to do all various different things. And at the same time, we're entering in cybersecurity a very dark age. The dark age is talking about all these different agents being able to execute for you. The bad guys now can have agents. One software developer who has bad intentions can now spawn thousands of agents to exploit systems and figure out how to break into things. So I think as we bring this out and as cybersecurity enters this dark age, we're setting ourselves up for a bad time with these cameras.
Understand. You mentioned Comal County. Do you know how many flock cameras, how much this technology is being used specifically in the Canyon Lake area, or maybe even New Braunfels, or just Comal County in general?
So from Comal, so there's a very interesting tactic with Flock. Flock is sort of the one who's like targeting our area. Flock in Texas doesn't really go at the county level. They go at the city level because the cities have pretty much like the overall say. So like if we were to ban in Comal County license plate detection readers, it wouldn't impact all the cameras set up in New Braunfels because New Braunfels has domain over the protection of that city. So you would need to go to the individual city level to remove those. To your questions of how many do we have? So when you go into a platform like DFlock, it's a bunch of people who drive around and they try to collect all the data of all the camera whereabouts. It says there's about 40 within Comal County. But I already know that New Braunfels, I think they even made this public, that they implemented in a first wave, I think it was like 28 cameras, something upper 20s, and then they did another wave of another 20. So you're looking at anywhere between 50 and 60 cameras within New Braunfels itself. And just driving around like Spring Branch, Bulverde area, I've already seen 5 there. So we could be looking at somewhere between 75, 80 total in Comal County.
Okay.
Yeah.
So none around Canyon Lake that you know of?
Canyon Lake, no. I live out in Canyon Lake, and I haven't spotted a single one, so I'm very happy that they're here. I actually intentionally drive around these. I have my GPS also set up to drive around any of them, so I don't get tagged to drive any detours through Canyon Lake.
Awesome. That's good. So you quoted Benjamin Franklin, and I'll paraphrase. It's basically those who would give up essential liberty for temporary safety don't deserve liberty. Why does that resonate with you?
Being free is hard. It's a responsibility.
Yeah.
It's something you need to fight for. You need to also go into risk. It's risky. And a lot of people are risk averse. They want to have the comfort or I see it as an illusion. Some people see it as like a truth, but they want to be under this guise of, I'm going to be safe over the next 5-10 years, without seeing the next consequences, and they're willing to, I guess, like trade off. And like Flock is like the perfect example of like, hey, I want my neighborhoods to be safe, and I want to set up all these cameras. But it's like, hey, what happens when we go into World War III, for example? I don't think there's going to be really much of a World War III, but if we go into a situation with World War III, what's stopping an adverse country from exploiting our entire flock system throughout the United States and overloading our local police force with random calls, and at the same time being able to track everybody and essentially wreak chaos remotely? And I guess like those, that's like a second order possible risk, and then you're not free. And it's rather, take the risk of having my car possibly being stolen. That's like already probabilistically not going to happen, but it's maybe slightly higher. Or am I going to trade that off for the illusion of having a camera in my neighborhood that's going to give me a sense of safety? So anybody who trades in a sense of safety doesn't deserve liberty. Liberty is the ability to live freely without authoritative restrictions, any authority or power above you telling you what you can and cannot do. You can essentially live off of your own value system.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if you just rightfully don't deserve true freedom if you're not willing to take the risks.
Yeah, that's why I have a problem with authoritative HOAs, because they seem to interfere with our freedom as well.
HOAs are. I intentionally don't move or live anywhere where there's an HOA, and I probably will never do that in my life because I don't want any entity telling me how to live.
Yeah. Do you think people fully understand how much data is already collected on them on a daily basis?
I do think actually people are aware, and they use that actually as a justification of like, oh, why? Like, what's another piece of data that they got on me? As like a, I've spoken to a lot of people in Comal County about these flocks and had a lot of debates and trying to really understand why do we allow this to happen. And quite often it's like, well, these companies are already tracking you and all these different things. This data is already out there. Yeah, I think people are aware that their data is collected. I don't think they know the magnitude of what they can do with it. That's sort of like the difference or the disconnect. And my main concern is because if you know so much about this individual, now all of a sudden you can shape their entire reality. You can give them. And as we're now transitioning even more and more into, we went from like television network to now everybody's just watching on their smart TVs, whatever
Right.
program. And it's like you have this illusion of like, hey, I'm free, but it's like the Netflix catalog, you're only seeing 0.1% of the Netflix catalog. This is
Yeah.
this is tailored to your worldview. Now all of a sudden they know your consumption habits. They know your family. Indirectly they know who your family members are. So they can present stories that invoke specific fears or concerns, and once they put you in a certain state of mind, they're able to advertise certain products to you. It becomes very like dystopian of your reality isn't your reality anymore. It's actually being controlled and steered. So people know they know a lot about you, but I don't think they know the magnitude of how much they can shape and mold you.
Yeah. It's like it's 1984.
Honestly, in 1984, I would. It's like a even more dystopian world than 1984 could even imagine, because it's like they give you this illusion of you are an individual,
Right.
whereas 1984 they like pounded it out of you, where it's like you're just part of this mass, and like we're just going to put everybody in this box. If you don't fit into the box, we'll cram you in. Yeah, they're like, oh, okay, go ahead, go over to that box that we also control, and that's where it's like gets sinister, pretty sinister.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm not going to say everybody because I think there are some of us that understand what's happening, but it's like some people are volunteering to build a surveillance society because it's convenient and because it provides us with some sense of security and safety.
I definitely agree with that. Like, it makes sense, but again, like, I think at the beginning of this talk, I was talking about people think too linearly. They're not thinking exponentially. And I think this also applies in a very abstract form of people think they're going to get like a linear safety, but your risk is actually becoming exponential.
Right.
And like I've been just doing like these weird thought experiments of like what are realistic issues that you see with like surveillance states, and like everybody has ring cameras now, and rings can actually now sync up with the flock database and the local police. Tell people don't get a ring, period, and if you get one, don't share your data with anybody. They've also built mesh nets, so your ring camera is connected to everybody else's ring cameras. It gets really weird, but trying to think of like realistic concerns. I genuinely think one realistic concern, and we're going to see this happen in the next 10 years, where you have a third world scammer sitting in India who, like, we're aware there's all these like scam calls trying to get grandma to transfer money and create some panic or havoc. But these attack vectors, once they get access to these systems, because it's going to become even easier and cheaper for them to attack our systems, they infiltrate your Ring cameras or the local flock cameras, and now they call you and in a panic, and they're able to say, hey, you just drove off past this and this, I'm so and so. They're going to have so much more information of telling you a story that you're going to be socially engineered to believe. And I think that's like actually a very realistic possible concern, and it's going to eventually happen. Yeah, I think the scammers may also be much more localized. Like, I know people are like also concerned of like the drug cartels within Texas moving around. It's like,
Right.
wait until they get access to the system. They know your whereabouts. They know your schedules. They know when you're not home. Yeah.
Yeah. What, if any, safeguards would make you more comfortable with this growing technology?
Which specifically the flocks,
Like
the license
the
plate?
flock cameras, the license plate recognition, the facial recognition.
I would feel significantly better if we had to live, if everybody had to say, okay, we want these cameras, we see your concerns, Philip. How should we build this where we can have the cameras but not have those risk attack surfaces that you're concerned about? There's a couple of things like you could realistically do, which would be like keeping the information localized,
Mhm.
building a server within the county that's only connected within the county, and then you essentially control the security access points to that server. I'm also a big fan of this technology, zero knowledge proofs, which is essentially a way to make data unreadable to other people, but gives verification. You can essentially, it's a complex topic, and I also am not too familiar with it, but essentially what you can do is it gets saved in a certain encryption where anybody can access it, but they need permissions, and if they have permissions, they don't get a simple they don't get your information. What it would be is like, hey, is this license plate in this county? It doesn't like search and show you all possible scenarios or pull up all the records of this license plate. But if this person has only permissions to know whether this this car is in this county, it will simply say yes, it is. No, it isn't.
Uh-huh.
So it's like another layer of encryption where it just gives you what you're requesting without
Which,
revealing the full picture. Yeah.
okay. All right, well, let's talk about government and transparency. You mentioned that you built a civic transparency tool for Comal County owners. Can you go into that and what transpired? Or
So I have like a couple of tools that I've built for Comal County. I don't know if many people used it. I think the most recent one that a lot of people used was Comal.news. I just keep buying different domain names. So Comal.news is essentially all our CAD records put in a different format so people can protest their appraisals. But one tool that I actually really liked that I built out was reading all the costs and money transfers from Comal County. So they by law have to show their books and all their transactions and tag them and show which fund it comes from. However, they scan them as PDFs and upload those PDFs. So they print it out, they get a signature, and then they rescan it and they upload that rescan. The issue is nobody's able to go through 1,000 transactions in a year and identify things. So what I've been able to do was scrape all those PDFs using different. I had to write like 10 different algorithms because some PDFs were good, some were bad, and essentially extract all that data and put it into a database so everybody can see what departments, what funds, what they're actually spending on. And it's a very like detailed level view of Comal County spending.
okay, those are interesting. I'll look those up. You said something a lot of people probably quietly believe but don't say out loud, and that is the government lies to us. Why do you think trust in our government has eroded so badly?
Uh, Information's becoming easier to obtain. I think that's really the the big thing. And as information has become cheaper, and when I mean cheaper is not like the actual physical cost, but the cost of time and energy to spend in getting the information, it has revealed that time and time again that trust is being we're being lied to in multiple ways, from different angles. Yeah, it's essentially this hyper information age. And I guess like our mental accounting, because now we're getting all this information, everybody has this like mental accounting of like, oh, this was true, this was wrong, and they're keeping track of it in their own heads. And as this hyper information is flowing, they're essentially realizing, hold up, the amount of lies is now exceeding the amount of truths. But I want to highlight, I don't think it has accelerated in the amount of lies. I think it's rather we're just now able to see it more.
Right. So do you think local governments are more trustworthy than the federal government?
Yes and no. So
Okay.
so yes, they are. They're significantly easier to hold accountable. Because they're much more accessible. Like in Comal County, I can go directly speak with the judge. In the state of Texas, it's going to take a little bit of work to get to Abbott. For me to go talk to Trump, it's like nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So it's like as that distance gets further away, it's harder to hold them accountable and to also influence them, and also to sort of gauge like is this person trustworthy? And just that proximity makes them naturally be more trustworthy. Now, the one thing is, and we also talked earlier about this, of like the systems, there's less surface area for corruption. So again, another point for being trustworthy. But if the system goes corrupt, it becomes very difficult to change and steer, because it's now you have this entire conspiracy team conspiring against their own citizens, or maybe it's not even against their own citizens, but it's their own self-interests.
So what role do you think ordinary citizens should play in holding officials accountable?
Yeah, it's like everybody has only a finite amount of time. So I don't expect everybody to raise hell with the government and like say attend every single meeting. A very pragmatic way about going about this would be to say pick one thing. Everybody should pick one thing that is important to them. Micromanage that little small thing and make sure you know everything about it within the county, and go be a nuisance whenever you feel like it's going in the wrong direction. And if everybody micromanages just one topic, you're going to end up having a relatively democratically determined or steered society. And of course, then you support other people when they have their own little micromanaged issue with the county, and that you go and support them where you can, but really just pick one issue and focus only on that issue instead of trying to like change the entire county. So that would be like my pragmatic solution to it.
Yeah, I previously interviewed, as a matter of fact, it was my first interview on this podcast. I interviewed a man who he's pretty much dedicated his life to the water quality of Comal or of Canyon Lake, and we just had a great conversation. And he is so passionate about making sure that our lake is clean in the future, is usable in the future. So it was pretty refreshing, and it was exactly what you talk about. Find your niche, find what you're interested in, and concentrate on it. And that's exactly what he's done.
He probably also gets a lot of support because a lot of other people also care about it. Maybe they don't have like the time and capacity for that, but they can. But essentially, he becomes the expert. Everybody supports this expert because they have this trust within him, and they sort of like through proxy give him their power.
Yeah, and he's made a believer in me. You know, he knows a lot of the data, and you know, I support him now. So. Cool. So let's change the gears a little bit again, and we're going to talk about your ideology, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
One of the things that you mentioned was that you were formerly Antifa Communist Socialist. I take it that means you're no longer Antifa Communist or Socialist, and that's a pretty huge transformation. What changed your worldview on that?
When I moved abroad, I really converted into being an anti-fascist, and really believed in essentially equality. It was like equity, equality debate within sort of the left woke framework was something I truly believed in, and I do believe everybody has the right for equal opportunity to be able to essentially carve their own path. But as I was in that space, there's a couple of things that like really indicated. There was a time where I was essentially driving around and organizing events in all these like squatters throughout Europe, and I was organizing parties with different squats, and most of these were Antifa communist squats, where they essentially saw like a wrecked train, an abandoned train yard was then occupied by a bunch of hippies, and I would come in and I would help organize with a party. And one thing that I really like noticed was that like really irked me after a while, because I did this like through well over 24 cities across Europe, and it was always the same thing. I would show up to these communes, I would get ready and do some work and put everything together, and I would look around and I would notice like 90% of them were just like lounging around, not contributing, not building this, not making this happen. But then they reap all the benefits of like this great party at the end, and then at the same time they get to have like the status thing just because they showed up early to set up. They're now all of a sudden like the hero who organized this party because they had like the social. It was like too much social status oriented. And then you had the small group of people. I wasn't the only one, but there's like a small group of people of like, hey, we actually put this, like, we did 80% of the work here to make all this happen. Yet we're sort of like pushed to the side. And just seeing this like unequal distribution of inputs and output, or like rewards. Essentially, the reward for them was they're of course incentivized to not do anything. So at like an economic level, I was already like, okay, this is messed up. Then came sort of like the next evolution of like, these are just lazy people. But then came like the next step of like the fight just never ends. It turned into, you're going to now, as soon as you take down one opponent, who's the next opponent? And it goes so far to the point where now you're infighting, because everybody's just trying to take the next one down so the next person can come up to power within whatever hierarchy, even though they don't believe in hierarchies quite often. There is like this hierarchy of like who's in charge, and then they try to cancel somebody else out or move them out. And it was just this constant fight. And then I went down sort of like the Bolsheviks revolution, and it had the same thing of like, it just kept going, infighting just accelerated, and then it turned into, you always have to change the party lines. If you're not part of the party line, you're now being changed. And I'm like, okay, so we're not as open as we claim to be. We don't really have an enemy. We just are constantly tearing ourselves down. And that sort of led, and at the same time, we don't reward the hard workers or the intellectually smart, really. It's more or less if you're playing the politics right. I don't want to be part of this. And that sort of really drove me away.
Do you think people today are becoming more politically tribal?
Yeah, I think so. I think we were always politically tribal, but I think as we've detached from other senses of belonging, we've put that energy into politics more. So
Right.
we've always been tribal, but I think politics is becoming one of the bigger shapers of that. Church has left as community town. People are moving much more often. They're not part of their local community. They're not part of a church. Religion's also sort of fallen off amongst the millennials. We do see religion ticking back up now with Gen Zs, but as these foundations of community have disappeared, our tribe energy has now gone into politics.
Yeah, I agree. So why do you think some people become radicalized? And do you think social media plays a part in making people more ideological?
I don't think people have, I guess people have become. Yeah, that's a good question with like the radicalization. I think people had these thoughts before, but they never spoke it out in public, and social media has played a role. Going back to your reality is now being shaped by the data that all these companies, and essentially your iPhone is sharing, most people are sharing all the apps information with other apps, so those apps know what you're doing, so they know sort of where you are I think the algorithms are also there to set, they're supposed to keep you there entrenched. So it's like, if somebody's worked up about one issue and it's like adjacent to an issue that you're worked up, you're more likely to be sucked into that. So there is like this like radicalization, but I think it was, you were already sort of radicalized at like a deeper mental state, but you didn't see it as a threat as much, and social media amplifies the threat
Yeah.
more. So you become that radicalization instinct in you is like, it's sort of like, I guess one topic that I keep seeing in Texas is, I don't really have much of an opinion, is they're very against the Muslims that are taking over Fresco, Texas. And it's like, I feel if you had more interactions with the Muslim community, you wouldn't feel as threatened. But at the same time, you have an instinct, and you rightfully have this instinct of like, hey, I want my community to be my community. But since that sits there, you don't see them as part of your community, so that part comes out.
Right.
I try to think about this, but it's hard to put it into words.
Yeah, I understand. It's challenging for me because I've spent so long in the Middle East, in Islamic countries, that I experienced Islamic society, and nobody wanted to kill me. I mean, they treated me with dignity and respect. They treated my wife wonderfully. So it's difficult for me to deal with that type of mentality. But that goes back to personal experience. You're shaped by your personal experiences.
Very true. In your case, like with you being in the Middle East, did you also see the fringes of that society?
The what? I'm sorry.
The fringes, sort of like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, one thing is you can even living in the Middle East, the expatriate society. Most of them, especially in Saudi Arabia, they live on housing compounds that are guarded and separate from, the Saudi society. And if you want, you can barricade yourself from the Saudi society. You can do everything you need to do right on the compound. I mean, from entertainment to shopping to everything you need. But my wife and I, maybe it's because I've lived in many different societies, but we were different. We wanted to go out and witness society. We wanted to go out and experience it. So we would just go out and stop at things that interest us, and talk to people, and experience things that most Americans probably would never experience, and talk to people that most Americans would probably never get the opportunity to talk to them. So yeah, we did. That's not all Americans did that. I had friends that never left the compound. The only time they left the compound was going to work and back. So, I mean, I guess it depends on, your philosophy and your level of safety and security. I felt safe and secure. I grew up with Iranians. After the Iranian Revolution, there were many Iranians that came to the U.S. So I grew up with Muslims, knowing Muslims, and being in their houses, and talking to them and playing with them, and other things like that. So I think that, that helped. But I've always tried to seek out the culture and society wherever I lived. Even, Texas. I'm not from Texas. I'm from Ohio originally, and then 45 years of traveling around, I really don't have a home. I mean, it was always going to be my home. Columbus, Ohio is always going to be my hometown. This job kind of fell into me and fell into my lap, and we love Texas. I mean, I don't always agree with the politics here, with the I would say that at the state level, I don't always agree with it, but I have a lot of freedom. Nobody bothers me. I do what I want. So I think it's all in perspective. It's all in your outlook, whether you have an open mind or whether you're a little more closed-minded. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Respectfully, that's cool. And the more exposure you get to other cultures, like it makes these things significantly easier to sort of
Yeah.
see
You're not
and go
always,
through the noise.
yeah, you're not always gonna see the fringes. I mean, nobody took me to these dark rooms where maybe Al Qaeda or something like that was around. But I was out there. I was out there with the people, just normal people like you and I, and I really enjoyed my time. So one more thing. I'm sorry. What's one thing Americans take for granted?
Uh, I honestly, I definitely think the lore and the myth of the Constitution and being an American. I think we sort of really spat on the concept of being an American, what our Constitution is, what it represents, and I think a lot of people have just sort of taken it for granted, especially like. Our Bill of Rights, like it's honestly a very novel concept, a very novel idea, and to have seen that over the last 100 years, or really like 80 years, probably 100 years, that we slowly degraded our basic human rights into this like very complex system. Um,
Right.
I was reading some of the Federalist Papers, and it's like they even talk about this, and that's why I also like shared this quote about liberty. It's like it's not easy. You need a fight for your liberty, but it can be. I think Benjamin Franklin said it's like, can they actually even keep their freedom? He was sort of like very like he was very like, whatever. This is a cool experiment. I support the experiments, but can they keep their freedom? And it's like I think we really don't appreciate what type of document and belief system that really came from this, and it's a shame.
Yeah. And we should spend our lives protecting it because that's our basic liberties right there. That's our basic freedoms. So, I think we had a good conversation so far, but if you don't mind, I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions and give me an answer. Just whatever comes off the top of your head, okay?
Okay.
All right. What is the most overrated technology?
uh that's so that's so hard. um um I I guess the I can't actually think of a rate. I think all technologies and all developments have been very, I guess, like the Slinky. But even there, it's like it served its purpose. It did well and made it into most overrated technologies don't become technologies.
Yeah, but they, a lot of people, and I know I'm changing subject here, but a lot of people talk about the space program and the Apollo programs and going to the moon and things like that, but they don't realize the technologies that came out of the space program and the things that we actually got out of the space program. New technologies, Velcro, something as simple as Velcro was developed for NASA. Yeah, that's just an opinion. What's the most underrated technology?
Besides like basics are the wheel, indoor plumbing, power generation's all form of it. Like those are really underrated technology, even though so much has come from it. But I would say one underrated technology that's going on right now is blockchains. I truly believe that's very underrated. It's actually being a lot of the world's right now being built with blockchains, and I don't think many people recognize it. But I think we're just at the beginning of it. You can replace entire governments with a blockchain. So there's a lot of potential there. It's like, are we going to harness it? And just because it's not on everybody's radar, I see it as underrated.
Okay. AI in 10 years, utopia or chaos?
Both. Depends on how you use it. So, like, take the internet, for example. Online gambling, social media, pornography. Those are all bad consequences of the internet. But at the same time, you now have people in like a small Appalachian town learning about mesh networks. So AI is going to be the same thing. All it is going to amplify the individual more in their own interests. If you're a lazy and undisciplined person who just has a dirty mind, you're just going to get lost in AI. If you're somebody who wants to build cool things, you're going to now have powers that no other human has been able to have before.
Right. What's one country Americans should learn from?
So maybe like bad lessons I have, more or less.
Okay.
So, like, I think the one big threat I see in the United States is this desire and need to redistribute the wealth. And I'm not a fan of redistribution of wealth. And this is like crazy that I was before like a communist. I'm now a hardcore free market libertarian. So, take a country like Rhodesia or South Africa now, that they've essentially inflated away their currency, that they sell, they essentially acquire private property and redistribute that private property to other entities. And then these other entities don't have the skill sets or the understanding of market forces, that they eventually like implode on themselves because they don't know how to manage these complicated systems. They think the system is what controls the power. No, it's the people who operate these systems and know how the system works that creates these powers. So I think that there's a lot we can learn about that as we are starting to explore forms of wealth redistribution in the United States. Another thing I think maybe for a lot of the boomers out there, look at Japan and the housing market in the 80s and 90s. And Japan, we should really learn from there of like what actually happened with like the stagnation. At the same time, you have a population decrease, but the equity in the home values that people had and their life savings essentially. So a lot of people in America are house rich. Their home is their but in the 80s and 90s, the Japanese housing market essentially was stagnant for 20 years while prices still increased and everything. So they actually lost long term. And I think it has a lot to do with the way credits were set up and the fact that we've essentially Ponzi'd ourselves up in the housing market in the United States so high that there's nobody who's able to come in underneath to continue the Ponzi. We sort of like reached this like cap of the Ponzi. And one stat that I found very interesting was at the time, there seems to be this age range between 40 and 35 as first-time home buyers. If you're first-time home buyers within that age range, you have no more upside on your house value. Mm-hmm. And that happened in Japan, and it was 20 years, and I think we could really learn from Japan. I don't know what we could learn, but it's happened, and it's starting to appear to happen here in the United States.
Yeah. I agree. I think there's a lot of things we could learn from different countries. I think our education system is in a shambles. I think there are some very, very successful countries as far as education is concerned that we can learn from. But that's just one opinion of mine.
Yeah. I did with education. I actually really like the United States where you can actually homeschool your kids. I'm a big adamant on homeschooling.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I agree that you should have the freedom to educate your children the way that you wish. But I also have an opinion that, we want to make sure that our kids are prepared appropriately and are prepared for, and we're not in our current society. We're not prepared for entering the workforce. We're not prepared for budgeting. We're not prepared for anything. We have to learn a lot of those things on our own or from our parents. So I think there's a fine line. Yeah, you should be able to educate your children however you wish, but I also think that we need to make sure that our level of education keeps pace with the upper learners. Like Japan. Japan's always been one of those countries that really has an outstanding education system. But that's just an opinion. I mean, yeah. We could talk about. We could have a podcast on that subject alone.
I could debate it. My natural instinct is like, okay, if we're using like Japan's education and it preparing their future generations, but then it's like, look at their workforce and the happiness within the workforce and also their economy. It isn't all too great. It's like, yes, they may have a good education system, but are they really preparing happy, successful people in society, or are they making just better sheep for the herd?
Yeah, and maybe we should look at what societies are producing those happy people, those successful people, those those type of things. There's so many different aspects that you can look at from, what makes a country good and what makes a country average and what makes a country shit. Good opinion. I appreciate your input. I love this back and forth. What's the most dangerous trend in American society today?
Useless screen time.
Yeah, sure.
But emphasis on useless. It's a matter of what you're doing with your screen time.
Right. I spend way too much time on TikTok, but I learn a lot too and gives me good ideas. So because there's an algorithm, just like there is in all social media, and it learns what my interests are. It learns what I'm interested in and what I'm passionate about. So I try to keep my TikTok is not full of bikinis doing the latest dance craze. My TikTok is more about what I like in technology and worldviews and things like that, because that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's an amplifier.
Yeah. So, what is the most hopeful trend in society?
The return to community and religion.
Okay.
We're seeing to diaspora to smaller towns in the United States. You're having young people moving out of big cities, and at the same time, you're seeing a growth in people returning to Christianity in the United States. Yeah, I just there's something nice of like, hey, people want to actually get real substance, whether you believe in it or not, of like religion, but people want something deeper.
Yeah, I believe in a sense of community, and I agree that that's one of the things that we've lost in America is a sense of community. Hell, I didn't even know my neighbors when I lived in San Antonio. Now my neighbors in Canyon Lake, I mean, we give each other food all the time. We share so much things. It's the little community that I live in is just amazing, and it's older people, of course, but it's much different from the communities that I have been in San Antonio. And prior to that, being in the military, there's always this sense of community. Military members always seem to get together and take care of each other. So that's what I missed about the military. And to be honest with you, we found it again here in Canyon Lake, so we love it.
Very nice. I'm definitely like envious of like the camaraderie of like fellow servicemen that they have together. Yeah. It's just like automatically we are on the same wavelength. We've been like because you guys go through this like gauntlet and everybody has to go through it. So essentially, and it's like everybody knows how it works. So it's really cool when you have those things, and it's really just these rituals and traditions that you have to go through that build the community.
That's true. Yeah, that binds us together. Believe me. I still have a lot of former comrades in the military that I stay in touch with, and we even have a reunion every year for the job that I did in the Air Force. And it's amazing some of the stuff we went through. Like you said, binds us and keeps us together. So, name one thing everyone should learn about AI.
Probabilistic versus deterministic compute. Once you get that, it's like you know how to talk with it better. You know how it's going to work and how it's going to evolve, and you're going to also know all sort of like the darker sides of it where it can go wrong.
True. Yeah. That's very true. Good point. What's one thing people should stop believing?
I don't like to tell people what they need to believe in or not believe in, so I can't really come up with something. Everyone's entitled to their own belief. Like I truly believe that.
Yeah, true. What's the biggest threat to liberty?
A lot of people will say competence, but I will say status.
Okay.
People's desire for status, and it leads them to want power and to infringe the powers of other individuals. So status.
Okay. And last but not least, what gives you hope for the future?
People. Just like generally people, you get into a conversation with anybody, as long as you're always going to find an overlap, a connecting point, and just the human factor and reaching out and talking to other people and giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe sometimes you go into a conversation where you're like, I don't like their political opinion, and that's just all that's consuming you. But it's like, maybe even if that's like a starting point, ask like, why do you have this political viewpoint? And if you break it down, you're going to end up finding, hey, they just want what's best for them and their community and their family. And then you realize, oh, I want that too. And then all of a sudden, now you can. Everybody, for the most part, 80% of us all can relate. Not 80% of us, all of us can relate on 80% of things, and it's usually
Right.
just that little 20% that we get so caught up into.
Yeah, those are the fringes that cause most of the problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that's one thing that I learned about myself when I was traveling as an expatriate. I learned that most people around the world, regardless of anything that makes us different from each other, want the same things. I mean, they want freedom, they want security, they want they want to be able to raise their family, they want to be able to go down to the lake and enjoy a picnic. They all want the same things. Um, it's just we may have different opinions about um, God, and other things, but we're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
um, well, Philip, this has been an incredible conversation. I really appreciate it. And I've learned a lot. And man, I think you and I need to have more conversations. We'll take it offline, but yeah, I loved it. I loved it. We covered AI. We talked about surveillance. We talked about liberty, government transparency. We talked about small town America and where technology may be taking all of us, whether we're ready for it or not. I appreciate you coming on and being willing to have a real conversation without the usual talking points or filters. So, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like, follow, and share and support the podcast. These are exactly the kind of conversations that Canyon Lake Unfiltered was created for. Thoughtful discussions about the issues shaping our community and our future. So, Philip, thanks again,
Thank you.
and we'll see you next time.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.